Hi guys, in today's video we're going to look at 4 ways to take the perfect panoramic. So let's get started. Now the first method to take the perfect panoramic is by far the simplest, and that's simply to crop your image in post. Now what this essentially means is you take the full size image, but keeping in mind that you actually want it to be a panoramic, and then when you put it into Photoshop or Lightroom, you crop it to a panoramic aspect ratio, such as 24:65, which is the old X-Pan format. Now if you're lucky enough to own a Fujifilm GFX medium format camera, you'll also find that you can set this aspect ratio in camera, and what that means is that you actually get a live view in the panoramic format, which makes life really simple. Now of course for this method to work you really need a high resolution camera body, but the good news is that most camera bodies nowadays are 24 megapixels or higher, and really, cropped down, that's still going to give you a decent sized print. Now in some ways the second method is the most simplest, but it's also the most expensive, and that's to use a film camera. You know, there are a number of dedicated film cameras which you can buy second hand, but you know, you're talking thousands of pounds for them. I used to use a Hasselblad X-Pan, which was a wonderful camera, but now you'd be lucky to get one for below £2,000 really. But what it does allow you to do is compose your shot in camera in the panoramic format, and there's no post-processing involved at all. And you know, film actually isn't that complicated, but as I say, it's an expensive option, and it's not one that I can really recommend to anybody nowadays. So whilst cropping's a good option, and film's an even better option perhaps, the first one relies on you having a high resolution body, and the second one relies on you having an expensive camera. And of course you have the running costs of film. So the next two options I'm going to discuss both involve post-processing, and they involve stitching a number of images together to create a panoramic. Now the advantage of this is you can actually create something that's bigger than the focal length of your lens, but it is reliant on the subject matter within your frame keeping still. So there are limitations with it, but it's a tried and tested route that a lot of people use, and really it's the one that you probably are expecting to watch in this video. So let's go to the hills. Now the third method involves using a specialist lens called the tilt and shift lens. Now a tilt and shift lens is normally used to avoid converging verticals when shooting architecture. So basically it keeps everything straight, and it works by shifting up or down, so you can keep the camera perfectly straight, so keeping the focal plane straight, and then you move the lens up. Now the reason why this lens can be of benefit when shooting panoramics is because not only will the lens shift up and down, it will also shift left and right. And what this means is because you're not moving the camera body but actually moving the lens, is that everything will stitch together perfectly. So simply what you do is you just compose your shot and you shift the lens to the left, take a shot, shift it back to the middle, take a shot, then shift it to the right, take a shot. And then when you get back home, you merge these 3 files into one single panoramic. And it's quite a simple technique which produces outstanding results virtually every time. But the final method also involves stitching, and it's the one that you're probably more familiar with. So what we're going to do, we're going to head off now, and we're going to find the perfect location for a panoramic shot, and we're going to set up and we're going to take one. And here we are, the fourth technique, which is by far the hardest, but probably the one that you're most familiar with. And basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a sequence of portrait shots of the crags and the hills, and I'm going to stitch them together to create one long panoramic. Now I could, in theory, just take it landscape and do one, maybe 4 of them, and stitch it together. But by taking portrait, I'm allowing myself a little bit more space for the composition to be slightly off. And this will make sense when you start seeing me move the tripod around, because the reality is, it's really hard to get your tripod perfectly level, so when you do the sweep, that it works perfectly. So I've got it as close as I can, which is really, there's a lot of trial and error going on there, but I've got it by using the electronic level in the camera. I can see it's virtually there, and I've also set the camera to manual. Now this is quite important, because what I don't want to happen is I don't want the exposure to change whilst taking each shot. I want a constant exposure through the whole lot. And finally, I've manually focused for exactly the same reason. That what I want everything to be as constant as possible, because that way I'm more likely to get a more successful stitch. Now, when the conditions are changed like this, basically I'm going to have to work really quick. And you may see there's the odd bit of light coming in and out. And I need that shaft of light, and I need to be able to work really quickly. Now, if it was nice and still, I would put the camera onto self-time and I would take a 2-second self-time between each shot. But because the light is so changing, I've decided to set myself a fairly fast shutter speed, so to try and minimise camera shake. And I'm basically just going to go through and do that sort of thing. Now, what's important is that we have a lot of overlap on each shot. So I'm probably going to take a ridiculous amount of shots just to get one single panoramic. But you know, that allows me a little bit of a safety net. If things aren't perfectly right, it'll stitch a bit easier. So as a rough guide, the more photos you have, the easier it is to stitch. And really it's a case of just waiting for the shot. Now I'm going to start at the right hand side and swing round to the left. But there's absolutely no reason why you can't start at your left hand side and swing all the way around. Now I'm going to overshoot it. So that means I'm going to go way past where I want my focal point to be, and then I'm going to continue way past where I want it to end. So really it's a case of waiting for the light. A useful tip is I'm going to put my hand in front for the first shot and take that shot, and that means I will know that's the start of the sequence. And now it's a waiting game, as landscape photography so often is. But this, as I say, this is the most trickiest out of all the techniques. But this is the one that's going to give me the biggest file size. This would allow me to print huge files if I really wanted to. But anyway, it looks like it's going to happen, so I'm going to stop waffling. And I'm going to work really quick as soon as the light hits the crags. You can probably see it behind me, it's happening. I'm going to have to be so quick on this. Who said landscape photography was a calm pastime? Now, a useful tip, in an ideal world I wouldn't be shooting at 24mm. I'd be working further back and I would be zooming in a little bit, because it sort of helps with the stitch again, because there's less chance of perspective distortion. But I'm quite close to the crags and it's just the way it is really. It's compromises. It's a bit frustrating watching this nice light breaking behind me when it's just not hitting my point, but again. Okay, it's time to go. Let's do it. So, first shot, second shot, third shot, fourth shot, fifth shot, sixth shot, seventh shot, 8th shot, 9th shot, 10th shot, 11th shot. Okay, so I'm back home and I've imported my files. Before I start the stitch, really what I would like to point out is that the conditions were less than ideal for really doing this sort of stuff. The light was changing really quickly, so it did make life a little bit difficult, but we'll see what we've got. Now, as you can see, I've got a staggering 22 files there, but I have seriously overshot. So I'm going to select every one that doesn't include my hand in, and now to right click, photo merge, panorama, and this will take a while. Probably a good time to have a cup of tea. What we do have to keep in mind is I'm actually merging 20 files, all shot on a Sony A7R Mark III, so they look like 20 42 megapixel files, so that's a lot of data for the computer to work with. Okay, so something's come up. I'm going to click on auto crop, and I'm also going to click on auto settings, and then I'm going to click merge. Okay, so this will take a while, but when the final file is created, what I will do is I will then crop it to taste, again using my favourite expand format. I will tweak the settings and I'll put the final image up now. So as you can see, really, out of the 4 methods I've discussed, really this is the most time consuming, and sometimes the results can be a little bit hit and miss. But it does allow you to create a panoramic. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe to the channel. And until next time, thank you for watching.